we're lucky to have three highly qualified panelists with us, who I'll introduce in a minute, to discuss their views on employment trends during and after COVID-19. Tonight's panel is brought to you by NEXTGen Detroit, JVS Human Services, and Jewish Working Women's Network. NEXTWork is generously supported by the Hadass and Dennis Bernard NEXTWork Endowment Fund. As someone deeply involved in both NEXTGen Detroit and the Jewish Working Women's Network, I'm really excited and passionate about tonight's panel and subject matter. First, a few housekeeping things. During the program, we're going to ask that everyone is muted. So if you have follow-up questions or questions for any of our panelists, please use the chat box, and you're going to want to chat NEXTGen Detroit. And we'll try to answer as many of the questions as we can in this hour. We'll be monitoring the chat box for questions that fit into the conversation. I also want to let everyone know that the program is being recorded. So if you don't want to be identified, please turn your video off and change your name. Finally, keep your eyes on the chat box as well, because we'll be posting some helpful resources we've curated. And again, ask questions. We want this to be helpful for you. So I want to introduce our panelists. First, Jason Charnas. Jason is the Director of Business and Career Services at JVS Human Services. Jason, can you share what you do there?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Thanks for letting me join this really tremendous panel. I am the Director of Business and Career Services at JVS Human Services. I've got a great team of staff that work with job seekers to help with resume writing, networking, job searches, as well as career counselors that are there to work with people that are uncertain of the next career that they're looking to have and who can work with them on that. So again, thanks so much for letting me join.
Thanks, Jason. Next, we have Johannah Schiffer. Johannah is the Director of People and Places at Telemis. Johannah, can you give us a little of your background?
Yeah. Thanks for having me as well. At Telemis, I handle the HR function, and prior to joining Telemis, I worked in various HR positions at a variety of different industries and company sizes. So very excited to be here today as well. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. And finally, we have Ryan Landau. Ryan is the founder of Repurpose, a startup in Detroit. Ryan, can you share a little bit about what you do at Repurpose?
Sure. Well, thanks, Jess, and great to see everyone's beautiful face on Zoom right now. So yeah, I run Repurpose. We are a recruiting marketplace. Essentially, we connect amazing humans with startup and technology companies. We essentially run a dating app, but in the career space, and really focus on one, building the community here in Detroit and Ann Arbor, but also thinking about the community, the startup community in the Midwest. And so there's some amazing things happening here in the middle of the country, and just really trying to highlight and celebrate everything that's going on here. So excited to be here, and thanks, Jess.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Each of our panelists are going to share some insights and advice based on their experiences and opinions from working in the field during these challenging times. I myself also have experience working in HR at Moose Jaw and startups in the recruiting and coaching space, so I'll be sharing a few thoughts as well. So let's get started. And please definitely add questions in the chat to NEXTGen Detroit. So our first question, Jason, we'll have you start on this one, because we know that there's tons of job seekers out there right now on the market. What can someone do to stand out during the COVID crisis when people start applying to jobs?
Thanks, Jess. It's a great question. We know that once employers start to reopen, once positions become available and get posted, there will be lots of people looking. And I think it's pretty significant to try to make yourself stand out and stand out from a crowd. One suggestion that I have is, hopefully people have been doing this, but take the time right now to show that you've done something besides finding the end of the internet or watching all of Netflix, but something that you can put on your resume, that you can sit down in an interview and say, this is what I did. This is something really productive, whether it was a class, whether it was an online course, whether through your own professional experience, there's a deficiency or something that you're not super strong at, and be really proactive in improving that area, something that will ultimately say, while I was sitting at home, I did something. And when I come to work for you, I'm not just going to sit around. I'm going to do something. That would be one really great piece of advice that I'd have.
Awesome. Thanks. Ryan, Johanna, you have other additions?
I can chime in real quickly. You know, obviously when we post a position now, we have a ton more candidates than we had before. And so to Jason's point, so important to distinguish yourself. One thing that recently I thought was a helpful thing was we had a position posted and we had 10 times the number of candidates than usual. And one of the candidates had reached out to the person that's currently in the role. So they found the incumbent on our company website, set up a time to speak to them to learn more about the position. And then obviously the current employee, and then the candidate also reached out to me. So that was just one way to kind of separate themselves. And I think it's helpful to do something like that and to try to stand out. And then I guess, yeah, I mean, that was really what, you know, kind of just following what Jason said, is trying to be something to continue to build your resume, but also try to find a way to distinguish yourself. And that was just a good example recently.
Cool, thanks. Okay, so I actually wanted to move a question to Johanna. We'll stick with you for a minute. How are your businesses and how do you think organizations are reacting to COVID-19? It's obviously had a big impact on the market, but maybe speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I certainly think it's been fast and furious for many organizations. Right now, from an HR perspective and from an organizational leadership perspective, many are starting to focus on what does re-entry look like into the workplace. So a lot of energy put towards how are we going to operate remotely or at a social distance? What are safety measures we need to do? Who are we bringing back? And so to that point, it also obviously impacts the employment and hiring practices. And truly, obviously, it depends on the industry and the company's needs in terms of how they're responding. I recently saw a survey that said 42% of companies have either froze or reduced hiring, and another 28% are considering that. So clearly there's a slowdown in hiring, which we all know, but there's still a lot of companies that are moving forward and also plan to probably in the near future. So, you know, in terms of what that looks like from a hiring perspective, a lot of companies are spending their time doing informational interviews and trying to get to build their pipeline for when they understand what, you know, there's less uncertainty and when they're ready to hire. And then, you know, certainly when there is a business need and it's a critical hire, they're going to move forward with hiring. And I think, you know, from an HR perspective, when this all started in mid-March, if I had a hiring need, I probably thought to myself, I'm going to slow down just a little bit because there's so many other priorities and wait to see when we're back in the office. I'm going to then work on interviewing and onboarding. But clearly we've all come to the realization that it's not going to look the same as it did in early March. So companies now are really focusing their energy on how to interview the whole, you know, have the whole interview process done remotely, how to onboard remotely, how to get someone set up remotely. So I think, you know, of course it depends again on the industry, but generally speaking, that's what I'm seeing.
Great. Okay, so Ryan, you work a lot with employers and people and lots of job candidates. So what are you seeing that people are doing, or what do you think that people can do right now while they're at home during this time? I know Jason kind of spoke a little bit about doing something while you know, you may not have a job or you're still looking for a job. So what are some things that people can concretely do?
Yeah, great question. So I think there's a couple things. The biggest one, and this is going to sound like a super obvious statement, but is research. And I want to touch on research for a second. Typically, when you're applying for a job, you're doing research, and the go-to place is like Glassdoor. Let me see what employees are saying about this employer. I think that's one resource, but I would also be looking at there's other review sites where customers are reviewing a product. And so you can see, you know, a company at the end of the day has to survive by building a business and building revenue. And so one really good thing you can do is see what the customers are saying about that specific company. Another thing when I say research is also looking at LinkedIn. And so I think a big part of a company's success is dependent, obviously, yes, if they have product market fit, but also the success of the leaders. And you can also look at their track record, saying, hey, has this person been a CMO 3 times before? Have they done this before? And so on and so forth. And so I think checking out LinkedIn, someone's like past record is a really good idea. I think checking out Glassdoor is an obvious statement. Checking out review sites and seeing how customers are actually reviewing that company. And then I would also say for a company to survive, this is another simple one, they have to have cash. And so I would do some research on that. Are they bringing in cash from raising money? Are they bringing in cash from taking out a bank loan? Are they bringing in cash from their customers? There's a variety of ways to stay alive and build a business. And so I would think about doing research, not only just what the employees are saying about it, but from a real holistic view.
Awesome. That's great advice. So I think, a lot of people right now, especially if someone was furloughed or maybe laid off or was looking for a job anyway, right before COVID hit, they may have a gap of their work history. They might have a gap right now. And then also you might have had a gap from previous experiences. So can you recommend for job seekers, maybe Jason, you'll leave this one, how does someone work around that? What should they write in their resume for this sort of time right now? And, how do you describe what if you were let go because of COVID? Maybe some insight into that.
Yeah, thanks. I think the COVID and unemployment gap in the near future is really easy to explain. 16% of the working population is currently unemployed. I think every business has been touched by this in some way or another. So businesses are aware. If you say I was furloughed, I was laid off, downsized, whatever it is because of COVID, they're going to understand. Though if you have other employment gaps, I think it's important to make sure those are addressed. You don't need to get into a lot of detail or personal detail, but if you don't address it, you leave it up to the person reading your resume or the person interviewing you to take a guess. And they may in their head say, fired, or whatever it might be. And so to be able to be honest, to address it, and actually then take that as a moment, and even like I said earlier, is to say, and while I was unemployed or while I was laid off, these are the things that I did. And it gives you an opportunity to turn the circle a little bit and give yourself a chance to spotlight what you've done while you were unemployed, or if you were caring for a family member, which often can cause people to step away from a job, whatever it is, but to be open, honest, to address it, because it happens. And of course, right now with COVID, it happens to a lot of people. So that I think is actually an easier one to address than other gaps that people may have.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, okay, one other question, sorry guys, kind of getting lots of questions. And I also want to encourage everybody to send in specific questions if they have. We've gotten a couple in here, but would love to see some more questions from you all about what you're interested in hearing about, or if there's anything specific. So send it to NEXTGen Detroit. But I think, one of the ways I always tell people, LinkedIn is definitely a great networking tool, also a tool to kind of keep updated. And I thought maybe, are there any general tips and tricks for utilizing or updating your LinkedIn during this time? Maybe, does everyone have maybe one good tip for LinkedIn?
Yeah.
Let's start, Johannah, let's start with you.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's such a powerful tool to be using and making sure it's updated. Recently, I think, as many of you probably see when you scroll through LinkedIn, you'll see a lot of posts with people saying something to the extent of, like so many, I've been impacted by COVID-19 and I've been laid off from my current employer. And they go on to explain, you know, they wish their current employer the best, but here's what they're looking for in their next move. And I think that's a great way to start to network through LinkedIn. And you know, certainly those that have worked with you in the past and respect you are going to tag other people, forward it along, make sure to put a hashtag in there as well to get, you know, more visibility to your post. I think that's one great way to use LinkedIn. I think also making sure to update your visibility and showing that you are interested in looking for careers is an important step. And I believe, you know, in the comments with the resources that will be shared, I recently came across an article, I think it was like a Forbes article that I put in there for resources. And this individual had so many great tips on LinkedIn. So I would encourage you guys to use it as a resource as well in terms of how to update profiles. So those would be some of my tips that come to mind by using it.
Great. Jason, any tips from you?
Absolutely. So a few quick and easy tips and then something a little bit deeper. Number one, your LinkedIn URL, your name shouldn't be LinkedIn/JChar69432, right? You can edit that. You should edit it so it's your name. And so it's really specific and easily identifiable to you. Number two, have a complete profile. The more complete your profile, every single step, every single piece makes a big difference in terms of visibility, in terms of people seeing it, and in terms of you showing that you are you're diligent, that you are really willing to complete a task. And the third quick one is contact former coworkers, current coworkers. Offer to write reviews of them, of jobs you've seen them do, of tasks, things that they're great at. It's not just about what people can do for you, but also how you can help other people. So make that offer, and if people offer that, please accept that. Let them write those reviews back to you on your LinkedIn. So just a couple right there.
Awesome. How about you, Ryan? I know you've got some LinkedIn tips up your sleeve.
Yeah, I think a couple things. So obviously I agree with everything that Johannah and Jason said, but the other thing that I might mention is I'm going to take the opposite end of the spectrum, is actually use LinkedIn for an opportunity not to talk about work and like be authentic and like show who you are, because an employer is looking through so many LinkedIns or resumes. So use LinkedIn as an opportunity to show your personality, show that you volunteer, show that you're an avid traveler. Maybe sometimes if you're comfortable enough, I've seen people post videos on LinkedIn. And so I think obviously you should definitely have your work stuff down and be super clear, show results that you're driving from each of the employment opportunities that you've had and say, hey, I've done X and I've accomplished Y. Like, I think all of those things are super important, but I would also take the opportunity to stand out on LinkedIn and just show your personality and be authentic to like who you really are.
Awesome. And I'd actually echo that and say, make sure that all your links, because the whole idea of LinkedIn is to link to other jobs and organizations, make sure those links are active. So if you put in your work experience and it's a smaller company or something, make sure you're actually linking to their page so that you're actually finding more and more links on your own, on what you see when you log into LinkedIn. And also, I always say, don't make it match exactly your resume. While you should have all the same sorts of things, you don't need it to be exactly what your resume says. It should be a little different, because often you're going to eventually send your resume and you have a little more flexibility for creativity and some other things. So utilize LinkedIn. We're getting a few questions in. I also wanted to ask, maybe, networking is always such a big piece of the job search, and we should always be networking. And as much as sometimes networking events can be overwhelming, we also know that they work, and people, often find jobs through people. So maybe we can talk about some tips around how to network when we're all stuck in our houses. Maybe Jason, why don't you lead us off and some networking tips for COVID?
Yeah, networking tips for COVID. In some ways, this COVID thing puts all people in some level of an even playing field. Introvert, extrovert, there's only so much you can do in terms of, you can't show up to a big event and shine and shake hands and pass out cards and resumes. But it's about the connections. It's about the genuine connections. Pre-COVID, we were hearing something like 80+% of people were finding jobs through networking. Post-COVID, I don't see that changing. And so those connections you have with former coworkers, with friends, people you may not have kept in touch with as much, it's an opportunity to continue to do that. You know, I suggest maybe 2 or 3 professional phone calls, virtual coffee dates each week, an opportunity to connect with different people in different industries, different people from different parts of your life, to continue that. People, let them know that you're going to be looking for work, what type of work it is, but also just as a way to connect. When people see that as genuine, they are interested and willing to help out. And of course, make that offer to other people if you have a connection that they can take advantage of, or that might help them get in the door, or you know a hiring manager somewhere that's looking. Help connect your friends, your network.
Great. Ryan, any networking tips over there?
Sure. Yeah, I think from a networking perspective, let's say the intention is to eventually get a job, right? That's the end result that you want. And I think it's good to know what that is. But I think sometimes there's a few steps to get there. And sometimes, you know, reaching out to someone going straight for the kill is not the ideal scenario. Again, not to compare getting a job to the dating world, but I think sometimes it's good to open up the conversation. One thing I've learned in my small little life is that people love talking about themselves. And so I think sometimes a great way and a great first thing to reach out to someone is, hey, you have done X, Y, and Z. I would love to get your advice. I would love to learn from you. Can you share from me your experiences X, Y, and Z? So asking people for advice, asking people for them to talk about themselves. People love doing that. So sometimes I would go for that. Even if the goal is still to talk about a job and get a job, I think there's a couple questions that you can do to lead up to that initial question.
Absolutely. Johannah, do you want to share your networking tips?
Yeah, well, I think what Jason and Ryan said are great suggestions. I don't really have much more to add in terms of that, but I couldn't agree more that I think referrals are still going to be the main source for many hires that are made. So I think we shouldn't underestimate, like you said, the virtual coffee dates or just reaching out to people to learn more about other jobs. I mean, and I think whether you're still employed and just know eventually you're going to look for something new and want to continue your career growth, you know, within your company or without, outside your company, or you're looking for something new, you know, it's just something that I wouldn't slow down and have, you know, get in your way. And the only other thing I would say in terms of networking, if you do know what you want to do and you have a specific industry, I think in terms of networking, you might find it effective to use a recruiter specifically within that industry or within that field. I have found that very helpful because they know a lot of the companies, they'll know what companies are actually hiring, and they'll know the cultures of those companies and if it's the right fit. So even again, if you're in an industry that's slowed down in hiring, I would still reach out to those recruiters and not slow down, because when, you know, people start to realize this is the new norm and they're able to move forward, I think it's important to be on top of that.
And kind of putting everyone's advice together, it is a time, like, you can build on your relationships now, and you never know when someone's going to hear of a job that opens up. So doing some of that relationship building and casual networking right now is going to be super helpful for the future. And I also think sometimes we're nervous that people are really, and obviously some people right now are super busy. They have their kids at home, or they've got lots of things going on, and other people might not be as busy, but even people who are busy, and even if you think someone might like not have time for you, it's still worth the ask, because often, you know, we give, we always like giving. And I think, you know, to everyone's point, if you also take care of your friends and make connections, it's going to come back at you. So I think it's really important to even ask for a 10-minute Zoom call, or, you know, now we kind of have the luxury of using Zoom, and you don't have to commute anywhere for your coffee dates or anything like that. So you might actually, some people may have a little more time to give to you as well. So we have a few questions coming in, which is great. So keep them coming. There were a couple questions around remote work. And so many people are working remotely right now. And if you guys, maybe this is Johanna and maybe Ryan, you have an idea from some of the startups you work with. But do we think that companies are going to be more flexible with work from home moving forward? And how can someone like get more access to that if they're maybe specifically looking for that?
I do think companies are going to be much more flexible than they were in the past. I mean, I've heard of a lot of companies now rethinking about their office space in general and the size that they have. So I think when you're looking for jobs, be open. And if you do that post that say, I'm looking for a job, I think you can say, you know, in this case, based in Metro Detroit or remotely, like just be, you know, very obvious about that. But, you know, how to search for it, I think, you know, how you filter out job search, you know, I think companies will just be more open to indicating remote. Because I think a lot of people have realized that we are able to work remotely, and it is able to move forward. So I think it'll be one of the positives that come out of this.
Great. Yeah, I think there's definitely lots more remote work going to be happening. We also had a question. So I think this could be for any of you, so someone will jump in, but advice for someone, you know, not everybody has lost their job right now, and there are still people who have a job, or maybe were looking for a job before COVID hit, or were looking for a promotion, or wanted to make some sort of move in their career or industry or anything. How do you, like, is now the time to do it? Do you think about it? What would the advice be for someone who was already kind of looking to make the move and now finds themselves during a job market where it might not make as much sense?
Yeah, so I guess I can touch on that quickly. So I think a few things. So what Johanna said earlier totally makes sense. And from a job seeker perspective, if you want to think about the pool, and Jason mentioned this from an unemployment perspective, the pool of candidates that are out there right now, there are a ton of candidates. And from a supply side, it does not meet demand. So that's one side of the story. The other side of the story that employers have the challenge with is sometimes also really good people are also employed right now. And so those really good people are also hesitant to move and want more stability. And so from an employer perspective, yes, you have a ton of candidates that are on the market right now, but you also have the flip story is it's really hard to pull people out. And so long story short, as Jessica was saying, if you're looking for a job and you have a job right now, I think now is as good as time as any. And I also think because the playing field is even, you're going to be able to get to know a company better from this remote fashion and Zoom. You know, someone can take you through a fancy office and there's like woos and wows of that and show you a cool Slurpee machine, but that's not culture. Culture is people. And I'm happy to talk about that in a little bit more in a second. But at the end of the day, I think it's still a great time if you have a job to be looking for a job.
Absolutely. Great, thank you. Actually, we can maybe follow up with you, Ryan, on that. Is now the time to find a job that's the right culture fit? You spoke a little bit about culture. Is that if during, you know, do you just pick up, and maybe someone else can also add on, but I know Ryan's got a little bit on this. Is now the time, are you looking for your dream job, or, you know, just a job to take a job because, you know, we know the market is pretty rough? Yeah,
so I think there's a couple things here just to divide the question a little bit is like right now a good time to look for a job, and then also talking about like culture and good questions to ask. So I think, looking for a job right now, if you want to look for it, is there less jobs than normal open right now? For sure. So that's just what's happening in the world. But I also think it's a really good time to prepare questions and ask questions to certain employers. One of the questions, I was recently just chatting with a job seeker, and they asked me this question about diversity. And immediately my mind shifted to, oh, they're talking about diversity, which means culture, race, gender, sexuality, all of these things, which most people talk about. But we also need to be thinking about the other diversity. And when I say diversity, is diversity of thought, and making sure that you're joining a company that it's not, from a leader perspective, it's not just top down and everyone's just taking, orders from the boss upstairs, that they're actually looking to foster a culture of that people that have different skill sets, of people that have different thought. And so, yes, when you are asking questions about culture, I think diversity, from all the obvious ones, gender, race, culture, sexuality, you should be asking about. But I would also be thinking about what are questions that you can make sure that the company that you're joining right now has a diverse set of thought and a diversity of thought. So just another thought, when you think about diversity, I think there's a lot of aspects to that.
Totally. We have a question here about overcoming age bias. And, for a lot of people who maybe aren't at the beginning of their career, but have had a successful career, and whether or not they want to make a change or are right now kind of forced to make a change. Jason, do you have any sort of insight of how does someone overcome maybe potential age bias that happens? It's sort of to the diversity question, I suppose. But yeah, maybe some insight there.
Sure, absolutely. So I have two thoughts. One is a quick one, which is a technology one. So people think in terms of age that you lack the technological skills. Now is the time on your resume to get rid of the AOL Yahoo email address, right? Have a really straightforward Google Gmail account. The next one is there is potential for companies to be downsizing or to be limiting the hiring that they're doing. And if somebody can come in and say, I have this really wide breadth of experience. So I know you're hiring me to do this job, but I can pitch in over here because I have experience on this. And I can pitch in and I can help out with this because I've got experience there. That's a way to flip it a little bit and say, hiring me is hiring experience, and I can do more and I can do a wider variety of things just because of my experiences. I know some people try to also limit the information they put on their resume to the last 10, 12, 15 years. So it doesn't show maybe that they are, that they fit that. So at least they can get in for an interview and then to take that interview as an opportunity to wow that employer. And so that they aren't worried or concerned about that age. But I mean, I wonder, Johannah probably has another great suggestion from an HR perspective and an interviewing perspective.
That's a great question. I mean, and I think it's a challenge too, is regardless of whatever age you are, trying to shift, if you're mid-career or late in your career, trying to shift to a new one. I think, especially now kind of going back to some of the networking, again, regardless of whatever age, but, really getting to know, trying to find someone in the company through a network or whatnot, trying to get to know people at a personal level. And I think then they can get to know you better than what's just on your resume, and understand if you'd be the right fit, again, whether culturally or have the right skill set. I think, don't minimize the opportunity to network, even if, during this time. And I think also in terms of age, Jason, I mean, I really like what you say, in terms of that they can be, wear multiple hats or kind of stretch in their work. And I think, just kind of emphasizing that and simply saying, just because of my experience, don't think that I'm expecting this salary. I understand I'm starting off here, and just being really transparent and open in the interview process, I think can help on both sides a lot.
Great. I also think when I've worked with people on building their resumes, sometimes you forget some of the things that you've done that might be relevant for a job you're applying to. It's always good to sort of do a check-in, and I've actually done this, like asking my sister or asking somebody who knows me pretty well, like, tell me what you think I've done. And I think it's sort of a good practice, just so that you can be reminded. Sometimes you've like have the exact experience, but your resumes look the same for the last 10 years. And so you've forgotten that to add something to it. So always be sort of double checking with, you know, your close family and friends, or someone that you can say, hey, remind me some of these things that I've done. And they might come up with something that you didn't even think you should have on your resume, or that just wasn't relevant when you were building it. So definitely always be updating resumes. Great, we've got a number of questions coming in. So this was sort of an on the flip side question. So someone who's really young or a recent grad, what's the best way that they can maybe encourage, and this might go to some of the networking, but encourage a company to take a chance on someone who's really green and that, you know, isn't going to have some of that same number of experiences as more mature or more experienced applicant. So newer applicants, yeah.
I guess I'll start it, and I'm sure others will. I mean, I find when I'm recruiting newer, you know, you have to find a way to, again, distinguish yourself during the interview process. So what I think doesn't work is when someone just graduates with a business degree or general degree, and we say, why are you interested in this position? And they give you a general answer, because I'm hardworking, I want to get my foot in the door, I want, you know, that's a dime a dozen kind of an answer. I think really getting specific into, maybe you have a passion around it, maybe you've been, you know, you shadowed people, you have like you really want to work for this because you appreciate their causes and what they do as an organization. I mean, being really specific in the interview process about why you're interested in that. And even when you fill out the application, a lot of times people just throw out the same cover letter and the same resume. And, you know, I work at a financial services firm. So if someone's applying for the associate advisor role, but they send me their resume and it looks like a marketing resume because that's what they did in undergrad, you know, you're just wasting everyone's time. So I think instead of just sending it out to the masses and hoping you're going to get somewhere, I would just be, my suggestion would be to spend more time, even again, whether it be on your resume, cover letter, even the application. Sometimes in the application, be one question: why are you interested in this role? And all you need is 1 or 2 sentences, but make it specific. And again, if you have the opportunity to network within the organization through your first and second degree connections on LinkedIn, take advantage of that, regardless of how much experience or what age you are.
Great.
So I have another thought, is social media. And with social media, if you know the companies you're looking to get an interview with, or you have an interview, or you're interested in, follow them on social media. Companies are posting what's important to them. And when you show up for an interview or on your cover letter, reference what you know is important to them, because that's what they are posting to the public. And whether it's Facebook, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Instagram, wherever they are, follow them and get a good sense of what that company is passionate about, or what they're really doing. And if you can relate it to yourself, you have experience with them, with that company, with the business, with a product, make it personal and connect to it. And I think that is another way to show that you're a step ahead of other candidates.
Absolutely. I also always say to check out the company's about page and look about the leaders of the organization and dig into where did they come from. And that's where you can really utilize LinkedIn as well to kind of follow someone's journey or path, or, you know, what other companies did they work at to get to a certain place. Really great advice. So this might be, we'll throw it out to anyone. What are the most important priorities for employers to be successful in finding new employees? So also someone who owns a business, or maybe, you know, people kind of on the flip side, what are companies, what are, I guess, some of the hiring trends that we're seeing? What yeah, what are some of the priorities in what a new hire should have, I guess is the question.
So I guess I can jump out. I hope I'm answering the question, but if I'm not, you can just tell me I'm not. So I think when you talk about trends or what employers are looking for, and then this is also addressed like the too old or the too young comment, it is what we hear a lot of the times, and this isn't for all industries, but we're specifically working with a lot of technology and startup companies. I think they care about two things. One, is this person like a really good human, and do their culture and values align with us as a company? And then the second thing is, I would say, like, can they help us move the business forward? So like, one, are you a good human? And two, can you help to move the business forward? I think when you talk about like hiring trends and stuff like that, I'll touch on the education thing. So obviously it's important to have an education if you're going to become a surgeon, if you're going to become a lawyer, and then the finance world, obviously. And I think in a lot of worlds, whether you went to Yale or whether you went to Wayne, I really think that means less and less these days. I really think your education is important, and it's important to have a solid education, but companies are thinking about, one, are you a good human? And then two, can you help move the business forward? Are you a good human? There's a lot of ways to display that, and we can talk about that in a second. Helping to move the business forward. I think if you're a marketing person and you're applying for, I'm just making this up, a content and a marketing role, I think a really good way to do it during the interview process, or to stand out, what Jason was referring to earlier, is maybe if you're a content person and they need help on their blog, is maybe send them a list of, hey, here's 10 content ideas, or here's an example blog post that I wrote for you that you guys could use tomorrow. And so again, companies are thinking about those two things, and pretend, if you are a candidate, that you're sitting in the job today, and try to do a project or do something and give it to that company as a part of as a part of the process.
Great. Thanks. That was it. You answered the question. You did a good job. We had another question here around salaries, like the willingness for whether the market has maybe reset due to COVID, salary negotiation, how much like should people be maybe negotiating now, or again, to this point of like, has anything changed because of COVID? Has that piece of being hired changed?
I guess I'll take a stab at this. I just say, based on my experience, I mean, I think it's a little bit too early to tell in terms of, seeing the impact on the long term. But I would say, based on hiring now, I don't think you want to take, if you're starting a new career and you have to start somewhere, that's a different, I have a different feeling about that. But if you're just trying, kind of progressing from where you were, you're looking for a new opportunity and growing from where you are, I don't think people need to be expecting lower salaries just yet. I mean, drastically lower. I mean, I haven't seen it much. And I think, companies that are hiring still want to be competitive, and still need, I don't think this is going to go on forever, ever, I mean, I think we're going to start to see a shift at some point, and I don't think you want to be in a situation where you took a 20% pay cut and then have to work your way up over the years for that. So that's just based on my experience, though, from what I've heard.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback from Johannah. Is I completely agree. Is like, one, yes, there's definitely, from a volume of jobs, there's definitely less, but from a salary perspective, we haven't seen so much of a change, or I don't think there's going to be like a big correction in the market from a salary perspective. What I would say, if you're a candidate or an employer, paying someone too much or paying someone too little is a really short-term solution. Or if you're a candidate and you negotiate a massively big salary for you, I mean, that's awesome for the short term. Or if you are underpaid, it's going to be a short-term solution. So literally what we've seen across 80 or 90 companies is when the delta goes way too high or way too low with paying someone too much or too little, it just doesn't work out in the long run. So I think a really good way to do it, just to make sure you can kind of see what you're worth, is do research. There's a lot of companies out there that have a lot of research about this. And so look at what you are making or what a position makes in that industry across a few different resources. And I think you should get a pretty good idea. But again, like Johanna said, like I wouldn't take a job for 20% less or 20% too much. Obviously, it sounds really cool to get paid a lot. But again, if you're not showing your value, I think that's a really short-term solution for you too. So yes, we have not seen a big fluctuation in salaries.
Great, thank you. So we know that unfortunately a lot of companies have been furloughing some of their employees. Jason, I don't know if you might have some thoughts on this, but maybe thoughts about people on furlough. Do we think, this is a very big question to say, do we think that companies might be calling some of these individuals back, but maybe some thoughts on if you've been furloughed or what someone who's been furloughed should be doing in terms of looking for a job or coming back?
Sure, I'll take a stab at that. Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't if anyone.
Absolutely. So, look, there are people that have been furloughed, and employers have every intention of rehiring, and hopefully that happens. We don't know what will happen tomorrow. We don't know what happened in the next couple of weeks or the next couple of months. I think that if you were furloughed, it never hurts to do something today, right? So it goes back to what did you do? Did you update your resume? Are you looking online? Those don't mean you're leaving your job. That doesn't mean you're looking for work, but you need to be set up, ready to go if you find out from your employer that furlough is turned into a layoff. Or you need to be ready to go if you find a job that is a great opportunity and that's what you've been wanting to do. You got to be able to jump and take advantage of whatever happens. So do I know what the global is going to happen? I have no idea. But if you've been furloughed, you got to do something. Get yourself ready for whatever will happen, and hopefully that job that you loved, that you're furloughed from, is able to bring you back. I don't know whether companies are going to wait for whatever is going on, wait for July or anything, but you should have that resume ready.
That's actually a great segue into another sort of question, and something I know that we all sort of spoke about are when you're at home sitting on your couch or you find yourself with some extra time right now, what are some of those classes or things that you can be doing? I know that there's a ton out there, but maybe if each of us have a few favorites of classes or resources or places that you can get some extra skills. Ryan, want to lead us off? Oh. Johanna, want to lead us off?
I was like, he's really thinking hard. Okay, so I think Ryan's frozen. So I think I've seen a few different training courses. One in particular that I thought was interesting was Dale Carnegie, which has a lot of online offerings at a cost, but if you follow their LinkedIn page, they've also been posting a few free webinars. So whether you're employed or if you're unemployed and looking to supplement your skill set, there might be a few there that are of interest. I think LinkedIn has a few free training courses. I know a lot of universities have been posting things, and I think just in general, if you are looking to make a career change because you're in an industry that's just not going to be there in the long run based on how things are or in the foreseeable future. I mean, I think certainly trying to get a designation, it might be worth the investment in that area or some further education. And that would help make you stand out as well.
Cool. Thank you. Jason, any favorites?
No, I don't have any favorites, but there are resources. There's a lot of stuff online. I would say find something that's interesting, find something that takes you to that next level or helps to improve whatever it is you're doing, and spend some time with a Google search or asking coworkers what they've done. Again, part of networking could be, in fact, what is a good class you recommend? If you're talking to one of your mentors, maybe they can give you a suggestion or a recommendation is what you can do to take yourself and help to continue that education and that improvement, that self-improvement.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think, I know I've taken a class to help me with Airtable and with a few other, like Excel would be a good time to sort of up your skills. So if there's a skill that you've always sort of had on your list, I think now is like the great time. And it also speaks to some of everyone's answers from before of if you are asked in an interview, what have you been doing with this time? And if you've been able to take one of those university classes, or even if it's you're exploring something like that has nothing to do with your job or career, it's still the ability to be able to say, I learned, I have this certificate, or I learned this course, or I've just sort of been sharpening a lot of my skills. I think that's like, it's an awesome time. And there's a ton of, we've listed, I know, a few of these resources here, and even doing a quick Google search will get you of, what classes to take. I don't know if we have Ryan back.
Yes,
Yes.
back in action. So I think specifically, there's definitely a lot of courses. I would also look at different like certifications. And so again, look at that, individual or that leader maybe that you want to be someday, and look at their, LinkedIn. Maybe they have, LinkedIn Learning has like a ton of things. Maybe they have a HubSpot certification, which is a marketing technology. Maybe they have a Salesforce certification. I mean, there is a lot of companies out there that the individual company has their own certifications. And so if you're trying to get a job at a company and you say, hey, they have these, technology stack, or these are some of the softwares that this company is using, check out those specific company, and maybe that individual company has different, certifications that you can take during this time.
Really great. Thank you. So I know we are sort of running out of time. Do any of you have any kind of last minute advice, any sort of parting words of wisdom from you guys? Johannah or Jason, go for
Sure,
it.
let me go. Number one, I want to just take a second to thank NEXTGen, Jess, to thank you, especially Hadass and Dennis Bernard, for sponsoring the NEXTWork events. It's really appreciated. I'm thrilled we had such a great turnout. So my advice is just do something, right? Don't look back and say, wow, that was an amazing furlough, layoff, COVID, coronavirus. Where did it go? I haven't done anything. I have nothing to show for it. So we've given lots of suggestions, lots of advice. At the end of the day, just do something. Write your resume, update your resume, get people to look at it. Make sure the basics are there, right? Spelling, grammar, make sure it's accurate, and good luck.
Awesome. Johannah, any words?
I would just say, I think it's a challenging time in general, even if you are gainfully employed. Obviously there's a lot of uncertainty right now, and it's isolating at times, and family care and whatnot. And searching for a job right now is particularly challenging. So I think, whether you're employed or not, whatever we can do to help each other in the community is so important. And, if you're posted that if you see someone looking for a job, like it, share it, do what we can do. Again, whether you're employed or not, because, I think things will definitely start to move forward, and I think people get used to the new phase that we're in as it evolves. But feel free to reach out if I can help in any way. It's been great being on the panel, so thank you.
Awesome, thanks. Ryan?
Yeah, so first want to echo what Jason and Johannah said. Is first, thank you for having me. This is so fun to see everyone's little faces on Zoom. So this is exciting. And I think once you get someone on the phone, one of the questions that we were talking about earlier is a diversity of thought. I think another question to ask is talking about like values. And, this thing called culture always just gets thrown out there. And like I was mentioning before, culture is not a ping pong table or a Slurpee machine. There's like real attributes that companies have, and really try to see, what those values are that a company has if you get them on the phone, and ask good questions to see those values in actions. And so really try to have a good understanding. Okay, this company talks about, flexibility all the time. All right, ask them a question about how they can show that value in action. They talk about how they are innovative. Ask them examples about how employees from a lower level are moving the company forward. So long story short is, I think, questions are really powerful, and make sure once you get someone on the phone that you're asking really impactful questions, not just surface level stuff, because I think as a candidate or as just a human being, that really actually shows the research that you've done, and shows a lot of value that you can bring to the company by asking good questions. And so, again, thanks for having me. And I want to echo some, I think Jason or Johanna mentioned it. Feel free to reach out to me anytime. Also, my email address is ryan@repurpose.co. That's ryan@repurpose.co. Email me anytime. I'm literally happy to help with anything.
Awesome. Thank you. So I really want to thank our amazing panelists. This was great. You guys offered such wonderful suggestions. I would also add, as like my final thought, is to ask for help. There's 3 amazing panelists here that have kind of offered tons of resources. Federation has tons of resources. There are just so many resources, and all of you who actually joined the call are, taking a first step and sort of starting out there. So really thank everyone for joining us and for sharing. I mentioned when we kicked things off, the Jewish Federation of Metro Detroit is here for you to build community in good times and bad. I also want to give a huge shout out to Lauren Rubin from NEXTGen, who organized the call and has been doing all of sort of the background, helping me manage questions. So snaps for her. And we hope you'll join NEXTGen Detroit on May 27th for our spaghetti and Sinai pasta making event, and join the Jewish Working Women's Network on June 5th for a virtual lunch and schmooze with Lee Moss. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Stay well and have a really amazing night. And scene.